whatever way possible, we need Christian leaders who have a good understanding of the Bible, to have a good understanding of what's going on in our nation as well, and then be able to communicate that effectively to the youth at the same time.
Welcome back, everyone. It's good to say welcome back, because this is now our second episode of the Jacob York Show. I'm your host, once again, Jacob York. That goes without saying, but I'm glad you guys are joining us for a very, very fun topic, a very controversial topic. In fact, I just posted a reel all over all of my social medias debating with a stranger about this topic, and that being Candace Owens and the claims that she's made against Turning Point, that she's really made against the entire world in regards to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Alongside me today is a good friend of mine. His name is Benaiah Collender. Benaiah, I'm going to welcome you on screen here. Tell the people who you are. Welcome to the show. Excited to have you with us.
It's good to be here. I'm a huge fan of the show, so I'm honored to be here. As you said, my name's Benaiah Collender. I'm from the beautiful, beautiful city of Billings, Montana, and I'm excited to dive into what it looks like to honor the Lord and to think critically about what's going on in our nation. So I'm excited for today. I am excited.
We're excited to have you on the show, Benaiah. Benaiah, before we get started, you are a young person. How old are you, Benaiah?
I am 19 years old.
You're 19 years old. How do young people, I should say, get involved in politics, have an opinion about such things like we're going to talk about today? I think that's important that people my age and yours really start to talk about these things and get involved and be like, hey, you know what? I think my opinion matters, and I think other people should hear it too.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are really two things that I would advise to people our age or younger aspiring to get into these type of conversations and these type of settings. First, I would say read and study and just dive into as much as you can from the great authors that came before us and the authors right now who are putting out amazing content. And then the second thing I would say is humility. I think at our age, it is so important to ask questions of people with opposing views, to ask questions of people who've been doing this longer than us. And I think when you combine the hard work of trying to learn more and then the humility to ask questions and hear others, it'll set you up in a great trajectory. And then obviously to get active, to go out there and do it in whatever sense you can.
Yeah, I love the last point you said, get active. Don't just have the opinion. Don't just soak in the knowledge. Those are important. That is arguably the most important part. But then you actually have to do something with that knowledge at the same time. And I think that is where a lot of people are on the defense right now in the political space, and not even political space. I think also just in the religious space, that they have the opinions, they have the knowledge, they have the resources to become wise on these topics, and they sit inside and they don't voice those opinions, or they don't do what they need to in order to get representation in their state or whatever it might be.
Of course.
All right. Let's talk about none other than Candace Owens. All right, let's get into it. We're going to talk about this in three different ways. Okay. The first being the heart posture of the way that she's going about this whole thing. The second being the inconsistent claims throughout this entire process of just asking questions. And thirdly, the constant attacks on Christianity throughout this entire investigation that she's conducting. So to set the stage, I want to play a video that comes from Candace's TikTok, her own TikTok page. And I think this explains everything we need to see about the heart posture in this entire thing. Let's take a look.
I want to be very clear. It is the most important thing to me that no harm comes to Erica. The most important thing. Their message, investigating this, she's getting death threats. No, let's be very clear on my intention in this investigation. I want Erica to outlive everyone. Long live Erica Francevay. Death is easy, actually. Death is easy. Living a long life when everybody knows who and what you are and what you are a part of and what you did. Long live Erica Francevay.
Oh boy. All right. Benaiah, you want to kick us off? What are your initial thoughts? Watching that video, we're talking about the vibe, the attitude, the emotional charged energy, and the way she's going about all this.
I think that her vibe and energy is very interesting to me. And it's something I question quite a lot, because I think we need to be very clear with what we're seeing right now throughout the course of this trial and even the course of her investigation, if you will. Her justification for her actions have been that she is striving to find justice for Charlie, for her friend. However, I did not hear Charlie's name brought up once, a defense of Charlie's justice. Rather, it was the condemnation and the punishment, if you will, of Erica. Now, Candace can have her opinions. We are all entitled to an opinion, but I am yet to see strong enough evidence supporting that she deliberately did it for such an attack that Candace is posing on Erica. And so I really struggle seeing that and seeing that hard posture going, I didn't hear once about justice for Charlie. I'm just hearing this condemnation and attack on Erica. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you hit on quite nicely there, Benaiah. I think the first being, if you remember and you go back to the very beginning, and I believe it's actually either a day or two, maybe it was 3 days after. It's one of the three. It's either the 11th, the 12th, or the 13th of September of last year. This started with Candace Owens saying, you know what? Charlie came to me in a dream, and now it's my personal goal to make sure this case is brought to full justice. And so I think from the get-go, it didn't have anything to do with Erica. It didn't have anything to do with Turning Point. And I would even say within that, it really doesn't have anything to do with Charlie. It has to do with the fact that Candace already made a claim that it's about herself. It's my personal mission to get this done. Okay. That's the first point. The second point I want to say, which I just think this is interesting in watching that first video, is the fact that Candace says, you know, I don't want any physical harm to come to Erica. Dying is easy. I think that's pretty morbid, especially when we're talking about all of this in light of an assassination of Charlie Kirk. Okay. I think that's a huge part of this, but I think along with that, I would say Candace is almost using an element of cancel culture, which I think is a tactic of the left, which we're going to talk about that in a minute. But in saying, you know, I don't want any physical harm to come to her. I just want her to be ridiculed. I want everybody to know what she did and what she's a part of and all that. And we're no longer asking questions in that video. We're not. There was not a single question asked. It's, you know what? I hope everyone knows what you did, Erica, and I hope everyone knows what you were a part of.
Mm-hmm. And I think you make some excellent points there. And for me personally, watching this, I struggle at times, and it makes me sad, because I remember back 2020 through very recently, I mean, I was a huge fan of Candace. I thought she stood for quite a few really, really amazing causes, and I really appreciated a lot of the work she's done. But I feel like she has now become so hell-bent on this vengeance, but it's not, I would argue it's not righteous vengeance, because there has not been the right evidence. And it seems like it's this almost, from my perspective, a self-absorbed view of justice, if you will.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And I think something that you're also onto is, me and you both can agree Candace stood for good things earlier on. And maybe she still does to some extent. But something in a video that I just reacted to, and I think you saw on social media, was she was like, oh yeah, we're uniting people on both sides of the aisle. And it was actually in a reaction video to the clip Drewski posted about Erica Kirk mocking her. She was like, yeah, this is how everyone's feeling. You know, people, it's no longer right and left. People on both sides of the aisle are all questioning her. And I think that's dangerous. Because one, I think uniting is a good thing. And this is what I said in that clip. I think uniting is a good thing, but I don't think uniting over the hatred of a widow is the type of thing I'd want to be remembered for. And that's what's going on with Candace right now. People are not remembering her for the early work that she did early on in her career. People are remembering her for what she's doing right now. And that is uniting people on both sides of the aisle, hating over a widow. And to be honest, that's not a good cause to unite the right to the left. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some cases, you know what, where the right and the left, they agree on more than what they say. we agree on what 50% of things, you could even say, and it's okay to unite over some things. I don't think the pursuit of the hatred and the demonizing of Erica Kirk is one of them.
No, absolutely not. And I think that point of uniting is really interesting, and it's something I'm excited to touch on more throughout this conversation. I do not believe that what Candace is doing is uniting America. I think we can see that all throughout social media and through the conversations you've had, and we'll dive into more. It's actually creating disunity. And as we'll talk through more in her inconsistencies later on, we can see that through her rhetoric, she is creating all these conspiracy theories and all these attacks on from different sides and different people choosing these different sections to agree with, and then attack the people who view the other section. So it's, oh, he was shot from the front. Oh, it's an inside job. No, it was Tyler Robbins. Like, all these different things are happening as a result. I think the biggest conversation recently has been this conversation of disunity and people diving into these conspiracy theories about corruption in our government, corruption in TPUSA. And I have very rarely heard over the past few months a conversation about the pursuit of life, liberty, and the obedience of Christ. And I think that is very concerning to me.
That's really good. And I think what's interesting is maybe she is uniting. Let's just say, for example, which I think Candace's viewer count has gone down significantly since the preliminary hearing. Okay. Mm-hmm. But let's just assume for a second that she is uniting everybody on both sides of the aisle. There's plenty of people, and I apologize for the words that just popped up on my camera. There's plenty of people in the right who are divided over this issue now. And actually, since the death of Charlie, and I think this is why Charlie Kirk was such an inspirational person. And if you don't know what to feel about him, I think this is a good reason for feeling positively about his life and his mission, is he was so good at uniting people. And now that he's been taken out of the equation, the conservative movement is completely fractured and split. And originally, a lot of people said, you know what, they might have taken out Charlie Kirk, but, 500,000 Charlie Kirks were just born. That may be true. And I think that is true. I do think that's true. However, I think within that, so much infighting has come out of it. And that's exactly what the left wanted out of this entire thing.
Yeah. And I think that if I were a strong leaning left person, and I was watching what was happening in the right now with all the disunity that we have, all the arguments, all the separation, I'd be just sitting back and going, I can't wait for 2028. This is exactly what I want. And I think that me saying that should be very concerning to the young conservatives and to the entire conservative party. That right now we are giving an opportunity for the left to take footing in this battle. And I mean, we know what we don't stand for. But right now we're giving an opportunity for them to unify, for them to take a strong stand for the things that we would consider evil in some senses. And I think that should be concerning to us.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up a quote right now, and it's from Shane Winnings. And basically what he's saying is that the reason the left loves what's going on with the right so much right now is with Charlie's death, we finally, and with just Charlie's latter end of his career, turning point, and Charlie finally broke through of trying to get conservative voices on campus. And now, because of the divide and the polarization, is Erica involved? Is Turning Point not what they say they are? And all of that, now, even more so than before, colleges are going to be reluctant for Turning Point chapters to be on campus and for Turning Point speakers to come. So it's definitely interesting. I think the heart posture behind it says more than even the inconsistencies in the argument, which we're about to get to in a second.
Yeah, I guess just to wrap up this section, I would say, I'm praying for Candace, and I would love to have a conversation with her. But from what I've seen, I am concerned, and I'm concerned at the damage that it is doing to the young conservative mind and our unity moving forward in our true objectives and our true goals, which is, like I said, life, liberty, and the pursuit of honoring God.
I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, Benaiah, let's start to get to the inconsistencies with the argument. I'm going to play a clip from the Piers Morgan show where Candace was on, and I think this is just one basic clip to see how the inconsistencies have have shown themselves, if I could say it that way. And then I'll let you talk about some that you see yourself. So let's play this clip really quick.
Obviously, for this to have been pulled off, there had to have been multiple people involved. There had to have been people at Turning Point that were complicit in having this happen. I didn't say that they murdered Charlie.
You said that people at Turning Point were complicit in his murder.
No, my exact sentence that I said was that there were people at Turning Point who are engaged in a cover-up.
No, you didn't.
I believe that thoroughly.
Candace, you didn't say that. You said literally.
I did say that on my entire show.
You said there were people at Turning Point complicit in his murder.
Okay.
That's what you said.
Obviously, for this to have been pulled off, there had to have been multiple people involved. There had to have been people at Turning Point that were complicit in having this happen.
You said complicit in the...
I actually remember when this clip came out and when this actually was happening in real time. And I like to refer to X as kind of a bar fight on social media. And Candace was getting absolutely shredded on social media, which is not always a good thing. For the record, I'm not necessarily supporting it. But I mean, that's what happens when you have a very clearly shown backing down, or not even backing down. It's just you're unable to say, oh yeah, I didn't mean to say that. And you get caught up in your own words and slipped up saying one thing and maybe you meant something else, or maybe you didn't, whatever the case, then yeah, X will punish you for it. That's for sure. So what do you think after watching that video?
I think that this speaks to one of the biggest issues with Candace's rhetoric, in my opinion. A very great mentor of mine gave me this phrase about a year ago. He said, be easily influenced, hard to persuade. And what he meant by that is to consider all variables, to think critically about things, but be very careful to draw conclusions and definitive conclusions until you've evaluated everything. And I think what we're seeing from Candace is that she's been very easily influenced and very easily persuaded. But then as she comes across more evidence, if you will, she's then changing her conclusion, and that's just doing so much damage. I mean, right here, I went back through and kind of tracked through the different conclusions she's drawn. If you don't mind, I'd love to share with your audience.
Go for it.
Okay. September 23rd, Candace made the claim that he had been shot from below. And this was 2025. And she made this claim because she said that maybe he looked down, the angle of the shot, and that there was no exit wound. Note that, no exit wound. But then September 26, 2025, she claims that he was shot from behind. Now, one of her main thought processes in this conclusion was that what we saw from the front was the exit wound. Now, I'm no genius, but for there to be an exit wound, there has to be an entrance wound. But on September 23rd, she said that there was only one entrance, one point, if you will, but now all of a sudden there's an exit, so there must be an entrance somewhere. Then, October 1st, 2025, she says this, and I quote, I 100% guarantee he was shot from the front. Now, note what she says next, and I think this is very important. She says that she knows this is the case because a fragment from the bullet was recovered in his neck. But let's fast forward to January 17th, 2026, where she said that there is more evidence of the rigged mic theory. Okay, so now we have this theory of a rigged mic. But didn't you just say on October 1st, 2025, that there's a piece of the bullet recovered in his neck? So that doesn't make sense. But then in that same video on January 17th, she went on to say that she had never dismissed the theories about the rigged mic. But if we go back to September 30th, 2025, she had denied the theories of a rigged mic, saying that from a side angle, you could see it was still intact and see it was still there and all these different pieces. And as I look at the sequence of events, it kind of scares me in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like
I do.
It's like
so
we don't have a clear argument, but what we do have is, as we showed earlier, her coming out saying that she just wants to make Erica suffer, and she doesn't wish death on her. She wants her to live out this life, but she can't even present a clear argument. it just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you bring up is why all of us tend to have a problem with Candace in the last 11 months now. But I think more importantly, on adding on top of all of that great information they just shared with us, and thank you for doing that research. That's pretty awesome.
Shout
along
out
with that,
Robbie Starbuck for helping direct me in these things.
There you go. Quick shout out, shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
I think going along with that, what's even more concerning is I'm okay if your theory bounces around a little bit. I mean, that's what happens with conspiracy theories, right? Is that they're going to change, they're going to bounce around, and that's totally fine. But I think what's more concerning is the fact that you're not able to say, you know what, I was wrong about that. Or you know what, yeah, I've changed my mind. It's the fact that you acted like this is what you had in mind the entire time and that it hasn't changed. And I think that even more so is that for literally 8 months now, she's been saying, oh, we're getting really close. Oh, we're getting close. We're about to crack this thing up when we're getting close. But her argument just keeps changing. It just keeps moving on to the next topic. And we're not actually getting any closer to the subject. We're just moving around the subject. And we're just firing from different spots now is all that is happening. And I think that's really important to note is the fact that she's telling her viewers and those loyalists to her show that, you know what, we are getting closer. You know what, we're going to pop the balloon on this thing, but it's not happening. And instead you're just orbiting around the subject. You're not actually attacking it.
Yeah. And I think you're 100% spot on there. And I kind of want to back that. Like from the quote from October 1st, she says she 100% guarantees. That's not like hey, I have this theory and we're pursuing it and there's evidence to support it, but we're diving in to figure it out. She said she 100% guarantees he was shot from the front. But then January 17th, that changes. And I think specifically the rhetoric of these conclusive 100% guarantees are one of the things that's caused so much damage. I mean, I'm sure you've seen on social media, comments are filled with people saying, oh, I stand with Candace. And then if somebody makes an alternate point, she's like, oh, well, this is a definitive, conclusive claim, and I can back it because Candace Owens said it's true. Candace Owens says it's true, but give it 3 months. She won't think it's true anymore. But these people are then bought into that idea and are willing to stand for it. And it's just creating so much decisiveness. And I want to, take maybe a little bit of the target away from Candace and say that this has kind of been the theme for many of these conspiracy theorists, if you will, around Charlie's death. I mean, we have Ian Carroll, who on September 7th, just a few days before Charlie passed, deliberately posted on Twitter saying that, responding to a post of Charlie's where he was saying that Jesus was king and all these different things, Ian Carroll responded saying that Charlie had sold out essentially to the Jews, sold out to the people who had crucified him. But now we see Aaron Carroll going out and making all these claims that Charlie died because he wasn't an Israeli sellout. And I'm like, guys, I'm no lawyer, but you can't keep contradicting yourself if you're trying to make a definitive claim.
Yeah, and I think I'm about to show another clip where it shows the fact that she is contradicting herself, or not Ian Carroll, but Candace is. And I think that's the problem is I don't mind if your theory changes. That's okay. That's what happens when you're trying to figure things out. And I don't even mind you asking questions. I really don't. But I think it's what you got onto there for a minute, which is saying I am 100% certain I can definitively say this. That's dangerous, especially if you don't know.
Really dangerous.
It's really dangerous because you might have some evidence, but you don't have the full truth. And I think that is what I showed in the debate with the stranger I had, is that I said that if the evidence comes out and the trial shows that Tyler Robinson is in fact the shooter, are you able to say you are wrong? She goes, no. And I said, exactly, because there's no amount of evidence that would convince you, because you're going solely off of assumption and you've already judged the people's intentions, the people's heart postures behind things and who they really are before you really know anything.
And I think you bring up an excellent point there that I think we're really seeing in American culture right now, specifically relating to everything going on with Charlie. And that's this confirmation bias when it comes to evidence. We've seen it, especially with Candace recently, where she buys into these ideas. She buys into these conspiracy theories. And then anytime she sees any piece of evidence or new information released about what happened, she interprets it based on the conclusion she wants to draw. Take the picture she saw with the car that Charlie had been taken in the hospital to. She sees this stuff on the ground and goes, rigged mic. That's the tempered glass from the rigged mic. I'm sure you've seen the photo. It's not a very clear photo.
It's not.
I mean, some people are speculating it's dried blood because we see a bunch of blood around that. And if anybody has been around dried blood, sometimes it can dry in weird ways. Now, I'm not saying it's dried blood, but I'm saying that's a theory as well. Other people are saying maybe somebody stepped on something. There are so many ways to interpret this, and there's so many possibilities. And I think it is so risky when we come to a conclusion so early that then everything else we view, we interpret in a framework that just tries to back that conclusion. Going back to what Chad Landrum told me, be easily influenced, not hard to persuade. Not easily persuaded, and then, we'll just make sure everything else fits in that box I created.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to bring up another Candace inconsistency. I'm about to play this clip real quick, but Candace did a CNN interview very shortly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, where they asked her some questions about her theories, and this was still very new, obviously. This was, I believe, September 16th. So very new. And I'm going to play the clip of how she goes about conducting interviews with people. And then I'm going to show you guys her tweet and then also the email beforehand, before the interview was actually conducted. So watch this clip real quick.
I obviously know I'm going to get asked this, so I'm going to do I don't even and this is a fact. You can ask anybody who's ever interviewed me. I never ask for questions ahead of time. I don't want to know. I don't want to know the direction it's going into. I never give them anything. I never say we can't talk about this. Nothing's off record, because even getting questions ahead to me, preparing answers, I obviously know I'm going to get.
All right. So there's the clip. Now, here is a tweet from Candace. Okay, so easy to debunk. See my email below. My CNN interview was booked before Charlie died, and it was related to my book launch. We kept the interview, which took place about 20 days after he had passed. And we told them in writing multiple times that I wanted no questions about Charlie. Despite this, CNN violated our request and asked about him once cameras were rolling. Okay, that's the line I really want to zoom in on, okay? Once cameras were rolling. So they're claiming that CNN, made this like, oh, you know what? We requested no questions, which is funny because literally in that clip, she literally says, oh, yeah, we don't ask for questions. We don't tell people we won't talk about this because then it feels scripted. And then she literally tweets, you know what? That's exactly what we did. And so then look at this email posted from CNN, or it wasn't posted by CNN, but it was posted by one of the interviewers. This top line, if I'm going to try to point to it, this top line right here, okay, that is from Candace's team. Thank you. So long as Charlie's discussed in a tasteful way, that's fine. I understand you have to ask. I would just keep it to 1 or 2 questions about his passing. She's still mourning, so it's a sensitive topic. Okay. But if you scroll down the line or the section below that, it says, yeah, same major thing we talked about initially, how Candace became Candace, early political work, all this stuff. And then underneath that, you mentioned she didn't feel up to talking about Charlie Kirk. Is that still the case? I asked because she's been driving a lot of conversation around the investigation of his shooting. So, Candace, we lied. we straight up lied because they asked before the cameras were rolling. And in that clip, you go, oh, I never, ever asked for questions before or say we can't talk about this, which is fine, okay? There's always exceptions to some things. But if you make the claim, oh, this never, ever, ever happens, and then it does, and then you backtrack in this tweet right here saying, oh, yeah, you know what? They violated our request to not talk about him once the cameras were rolling, even though your team agreed to it in that email that it was fine to ask 1 or 2 questions in a tasteful way about it.
Yeah, I think the evidence speaks for itself. I was trying to think of something good to say, but I don't know what else to say. I think there needs to be a willingness to admit when you're wrong or something changes, or, there needs to be consistency. And I think that's something that's lacking right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into our third piece of this, which is the constant attacks around Christianity throughout this entire thing. Candace multiple times has poked at how they're using Christianity as a shield cover up for what their actual, branding is and whatnot. I know there's a clip from WLS where of someone who was in the conference shouted that Erica Kirk protects pedophiles. And then Candace's response, or Erica's response, was like, I hope you find your joy, because that's what she was talking about right beforehand. Candace goes, oh, yeah, this is like the new TPUSA grift, is that they're like, I'll pray for you, honey, this kind of stuff, which I think is dangerous. It's dangerous to poke at Christianity. And I'm not going to say Erica is 100% justified in everything she's ever said. Okay?
No.
Erica is great, in my opinion. However, she is just as much as a sinner as I am, as you are, as Candace is. Okay,
100%.
I think that's important to know. She's not invincible. However, let's look at this for what it really is, because I think it is an attack on Christianity. And me and you can speak to that, because actually me and you hung out at the Turning Point Education Summit, where we saw plenty of Christian speakers not only share the gospel, but speak with such good biblical literacy at the same time.
Yes, and let's just start on the conversation of Erica, since we both were there. We both got to see her speak. I have never had a conversation really with Erica. So I don't know her personally. I know you've been on the phone with her, whether that was in a group setting or individually. Not totally sure. You can clarify that in a second. But what I can say is that in that conference, when she was speaking and being interviewed, she was constantly speaking Christian values, telling us to pursue the Lord, to pursue righteousness, to pursue understanding him. And I think that's a very important thing. A verse I wanted to bring up was from John 15. In John 15, Jesus gives clear direction as to how we evaluate if somebody's a disciple of him. He says this in verse 8, "This to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourself to be my disciple." So if we want to evaluate if somebody is a disciple of Christ, if somebody's honoring him, well, we must evaluate their fruit. And so I say, let's just take a second. Let's evaluate Turning Point's fruit. Jacob, you were just at CLS. Give us a little preview. What would you say the fruit of CLS was?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm not going to claim every single student there was Christian. I'm not even going to claim that every student there who claimed to be Christian was saved. Me and you know this, operating in a church environment. Plenty of people are wolves in sheep's clothing. They think that they're saved. They are not. And I actually think that's the most dangerous thing in this world. And that's totally side note. The most dangerous thing in this world is not the unbeliever who is going to spend eternity in punishment. But the most dangerous thing is the unbeliever who thinks they are a believer.
Amen. Somebody gets interesting in the pulpit right now.
But with CLS, not only did we all get a book by Charlie Kirk, which I have right here, talking about how to honor the Sabbath in your life, which I think a lot of people could read that, to be honest with you. I could read that again.
I'm working on it right now.
But along with that, Erica prayed, or actually Erica didn't pray. Erica had someone come out from backstage and pray over the entire student body that was in front of her. To end CLS. Oh, I almost just knocked over my mic. So I think that's one way where you see that. Another way you see that is, and I'm going to go to someone who is not Erica, but also some of the speakers they bring. I'm not going to claim every single speaker there is Christian. That's fine. It's not the case. Not every single speaker at CLS was a Christian. However, they did bring in one very notable speaker, and that of Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War. And I will say one of my favorite parts about this, and I told this to a good buddy of mine, Noah Coffin, which is my favorite part about CLS, was not hearing Pete Hegseth speak, even though it was incredible, but it was the fact that throughout his speech, he referenced Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior so many times. And that was evident at the Educator Summit that me and you were both at as well.
Yes, sir. And I want to talk about the Educator Summit for a second. The entire purpose of Turning Point Education and the Educator Summit is to get Christian biblical values back into schools and back into education. Like specifically a speaker that stood out to me was Dr. Barna, and what he talked about. He made it very clear that we're not just looking for Christian worldview back in school. We're looking for biblical biblical worldview. And I think that's very important. The entire purpose of Turning Point education is to bring biblical values to students, to educate them in critical thinking and biblical worldview and understanding the world around them and how that comes from our Creator. And I think it is so important to recognize, because if somebody wants to come and say TPUSA is hiding under this title of Christian, but they're not real Christians, that's a bold claim. But I'm going to be honest, that's an okay claim to make. So let's be easily influenced, hard to persuade. Let's look at the evidence. I can't see it, because they're pushing biblical worldview. They're pushing us to pursue Christ, to pursue understanding, to read the great authors that come before us. And those are authors you can't change, right? You can't edit those texts. You can't frame that worldview the way that you want. They are telling us to go back to the critical thinkers, to frame our own perspectives and our own worldviews. And I think it's really hard to be able to agree with Candace on this point.
Yeah, and I think, Dr. Al Mohler was there, who's a phenomenal. I love Dr. Al Mohler. I'm a huge fan of
he's
him.
amazing.
The Briefing, one of my favorite shows. He actually hasn't come out with an episode in a little bit. It's making me a little bit upset, but it's fine.
I don't know what to listen to when I drive to work.
Yeah, exactly. He spoke phenomenally. There was just so many speakers there who emphasized the importance of Christian education, who emphasized the importance of the family educating their children and bringing them up in Christ, which is huge as well.
Excellent.
But I think this is what's funny. Is that a separate branch from just Turning Point in general? Yes, it's its own branch. Turning Point education is its own branch, and Hertzberg does a phenomenal job instructing that branch to implement Christian worldview, to implement having good civic dialogue, but also understanding our foundational our foundational documents in this country, and understanding how we got to where we are and how a lot of this country is built on Christian values. Hunts does a great job of implementing that into all the curriculum and bringing in good speakers who also implement that into the kids as well. But where I'm going with this is there is a Turning Point faith branch. There is a Turning Point education branch where you can clearly see the gospel proclaimed. And even in the Turning Point branch as well, even though that's not every single message, it's still there. It's still there. And I would argue it's still the main thing for 90% of the speakers they bring in. And I think that's important. I think that's important. I think it shows the fruit of what's going on in Turning Point. And then also you see all the students there who are all singing a worship song after Erica leaves the stage. And they're all applauding after she's done praying. It's cool to see. It's cool to be a part of, and it's helpful for me that I meet other people there. I met a great kid from Masters University in California who was very theologically similar with me, and we had great conversations about theology. But then there's also other kids who, they have the good conservative values, and I think this is important. And I really want to highlight this for a minute, because I actually did an interview about this. Is there's kids there who have the conservative values, and maybe they have their politics 100% correct as well. However, in the grand scheme of things, your politics are not going to save you. The things you do in the political realm are not going to save you. However, your faith in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior is the only thing that can save you. And it's because he is the way, the truth, and the life. And there are so many kids at Turning Point that I know personally who believe that very same thing as me. And once again, Charlie was one person, okay? And that's important, okay? Charlie was phenomenal, one of a kind, irreplaceable, genuinely. However, Turning Point cannot rely on one man's back. That has to rely on the students who are actually out there conducting events, getting things done on college campuses, getting other people involved, whether it's one conversation with a teacher or a student or someone in the cafeteria. That's what Turning Point is built off of. And I think everybody, honestly, who works at Turning Point would agree to some extent. And that does not diminish the work that they all do. It's incredible. And I can say that as a Turning Point president, the work that is done behind the scenes is truly incredible. But it solely relies on the students. And that's why Turning Point is such a cool thing, is because Charlie has created this culture and this environment that students can not only glorify Christ through this, but they can have good civic dialogue on college campuses and bring awareness to the things in this country that need to be brought awareness. And that's what's important. And I think and so now let's flip the script. Okay. We've talked about the fruit of Turning Point. Now let's talk about the fruit of Candace throughout this entire thing.
Yeah, I think that we can clearly see that the fruit is disunity. It's arguments between people. It's one of the big things. It's hate towards Erica Kirk. Now, again, I want to be clear. I don't know Erica Kirk at all, right? So I'm not sitting here trying to make a claim about her. But what I can say is the Bible tells us even to our enemies, and I want to be also very clear, I'm not saying Erica's an enemy. Just want to make that clear. But the Bible says to love our enemies. What part of what we have seen has been loving? What part of the fruit that we see in the people has been loving? I watched Erica Kirk forgive the man who shot her husband. And then she got hate for that. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, of all the fruit of Christ, forgiving the person who shot your husband or hating a woman because you think she's faking it, I think that speaks for itself.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Benaiah, let's paint a hypothetical here. I love hypotheticals. I think they're great
hypotheticals as well.
Okay, let's paint a hypothetical. Let's say I was going through a breakup. Okay, hypothetical example. Going through a breakup. I said some stuff. We broke up. There's a lot of drama because that's how, teenagers and young adults are. There's a lot of drama, all this stuff. Would you do everything the way I am doing it?
Probably not. And
Probably
I can speak
not.
from my my own past experiences. I deeply regret some choices I made in action. And yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, me too, man. But you got me derailed, man. That was not a good hypothetical, maybe. No, let's just say.
I get what you're saying.
Let's just say, even if I did things, wow, I am so derailed. Even if I did things 100, 1000% right, which would never happen for the record, especially not me. But let's say it did. Let's say I did things 100% right. You still wouldn't do things exactly how I did them. Because you are your own person. Let's say Erica, for the sake of conversation, has done everything right over the last 11 months, which she very obviously has not, because she's a sinner and because she's a human. And that doesn't give her an excuse just to be like, oh, she's a sinner, it's fine. Like, no, we're all going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. I'm sure I've made mistakes already on this show. Okay. However, to sit there and point the finger, and this is a clip that I want to play for you guys all in a minute, which is this part 2 of the debate that I had with that stranger, is that you can sit there and you can say she wasn't allowed to cry then, but she is allowed to cry here, and she didn't do that here, so that's what makes her evil. She was on stage with the fireworks and this, and she wears all the rings and all this stuff. Just because it's not done your way means it's automatically bad, and just because maybe there's something you don't like means you can automatically deem it evil.
That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. And I think we've lost that in American culture recently. We have become so entitled to our feelings as to how things should be done that I think we have lost the ability to objectively analyze something and say, okay, maybe this isn't the way I would have done it, but that doesn't mean it's evil. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think that's a great point.
I appreciate it, Benaiah.
I got you.
I appreciate it. All right, let's watch this last clip, and then we'll have some closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up. Let's watch this debate that I had with this lady on the street.
We're at odds with this too. Hold on, it was a thing just the other day, so I don't have a good memory. I mean, she's laughing 7 days after her husband died. You seen that video? 7 days.
So she's not allowed. She's not allowed to. She's not allowed to laugh.
7 days after your husband has been brutally murdered, and you go back to work. Look at her. No.
You can't smile.
No, you can't. 7 days. No, you can't. You go back.
So when is the appropriate time that you can smile or laugh after? See, that's the thing is that you. Okay, exactly. So you guys have an already made up standard for something that you've never been through, something that Candace has never been through. At some point in 7 days, you think you're not allowed to smile at all. That's what the beauty of being a Christian is, understanding that Charlie's in a better place now. Of course, it's a terrible thing. Of course, she mourned. I did too. But I remember hours after it happened, me making promises to myself and then smiling afterward and saying, you know what man intended for evil, God intended for good.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Well, but clearly not, because if she smiles 7 days, after, she's a demon now.
She's out on the stage like 11 days after, in her gaudy pantsuit with fireworks everywhere, smiling at everybody who's looking at her like she's done something in her life. I saw something yesterday, JFK's funeral. The widow, Jackie, and the 2 kids behind, solemn looking. She's at her husband's funeral with fireworks going off and her glittering, standing on the stage smiling.
She cried on stage. Erica.
We're at odds with this too.
Oh, I accidentally brought it back up. But yeah, I think that last part, it's not my favorite, but I think it's funny because we went from, oh, she's smiling then to now she's smiling on stage, but she cried on stage too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as I hear that, something that comes to mind is this. So my dad lost his father about 2018. And my dad and his dad, one of the things they were really into was movies. And so they go and see movies together. He grew up in like prime LA. He was like in Glendale, like back then. I'm jealous. I'm very jealous. Like, why'd you move to Montana? Love Montana, but could have been prime LA. And so that's one of the ways he used to bond with his dad. And specifically, he'd go and get pistachio ice cream with his dad and watch movies, and they'd sit and talk. After my dad lost his dad, me and my dad would go watch movies. We'd go get pistachio ice cream. That was one of the ways that we honored his dad and also enjoyed time together. And one of the things I can remember specifically after, just after his dad had passed away, was how much joy he found in those moments with me. How much joy he had in spending that time with me and remembering his dad doing those things. He smiled. We would go and see a movie in the theaters and get pistachio ice cream. My dad didn't cry. He enjoyed the moments because he knew that his dad was in heaven. He remembered he savored what he had with his dad and then what he was having now. And so this is just a speculation. I don't have much evidence to say this is a fact, but just as I look at Erica and the joy she has in what she's doing now at the Turning Point, I imagine it might be something similar to what my dad had with me, remembering what he had with his dad. I imagine that maybe there's a part of Erica that when she goes out there, she's like, I'm getting to honor my husband's legacy. And I think that's something to consider. Obviously, I haven't had the opportunity to have a conversation with her and see if that is the case. But just comparing that with the moments I had with my dad, I think it's interesting that people expect her to just be sad all the time. Like, why can't she find joy in honoring what her husband did and following in his footsteps?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Wow. Not a lot I can say if that's a really good point. And I think another huge part of that is I think Erica gets joy and she sees little bits and pieces of her husband through the students that she interacts with and what she's doing, not just like in carrying out the mission, but also in like interacting with each and every one of us. I mean, they said what I said earlier is then this is what they were saying when Charlie was shot is that, they might have taken Charlie out, but 100,000, 500,000 little Charlie Kirks were born. And of course I'm never going to be Charlie. You're never going to be Charlie. And nobody is. Charlie was one of a kind for sure. But little bits and pieces, little passions here, little conversations there. You can see parts of the movement he started. And that's kind of what Erica said on stage at CLS when she came back. And this was the week of the hearing. And she said, you know what, if this room or if the courtroom, she said this, if the courtroom I was at looked more like this room I'm sitting in front of, our country would be a lot better place. And I can only imagine what she went through at that. But I think the last thing that I want to touch on, and then I want to hear your final thoughts, and then then we'll wrap up. But is what I said to that lady, which is when you're a Christian, what men intended for evil, God intended for good. You see that, the beauty of that in ways that the unbeliever cannot. And I'm not going to assume anything. I based off the conversation I had with that lady, I actually assume that she probably is saved. I'm never going to assume, like, I just don't know. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in charge of that, to be honest. I would do a terrible job. But from what I could tell, it seemed that she was saved. And in fact, we had a 30-minute long debate and we walked away and shook hands and said, God bless you. So that is really encouraging. And I don't know what Candace's, faith is like. Maybe she's saved, maybe she's not. I don't know. I know what she claims, and that's all I can go off of. And then I can try to see her actions, right?
Mhm.
But what I do know is if you are saved, you see the benefits of what I just said, which is what men intended for evil, God intended for good. When you are saved, you see that in a totally different way. And in fact, you see all of these world events that happen, and you look at scripture and you see it differently, as because the Holy Spirit is transforming you from the inside out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think that one of the biggest things that I'm encouraged to do in this season, besides the closing thoughts, which we'll get to in a second, but I think as I just look at everything that's going on, it's important to remember that God is a just God. He's merciful, but he's also a just God, which means he will get justice for Charlie. And I think that's something we should all take hope in, and also take a little peace in. To remember that he is a just God, and he is a good God, and he will bring justice for Charlie. And so that's just something that I think has been really important to me through this whole series of blah, you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. And I want to thank you for being on the show. This is definitely a heavy topic, and there's going to be people in the comment section expressing. I actually, when you were going on a rant, I was looking through my Facebook, and the reel I posted with me debating about with that woman about Candace, there was a bunch of hate comments, and I got one of the notifications. I was laughing because I was literally going to say this at the end of the show, but there's going to be people who say stuff. To wrap up, I want both of us, and I'll let you go first, and then I'll close this out. I want you to talk about how the opinions of others, it matters in real time. Like, it matters when you're going through things, work-related, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in the grand scheme of things, there's one opinion that matters.
100%.
And I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it is important for us to live for an audience of one, but to serve for an audience of many. And what I mean by that is that what I mean by that is that when we look at ourselves and trying to find our worth, we should understand that our worth comes from one place, and that's Jesus. However, Jesus put us on this earth to be salt and light to the many. And so that should dictate our actions in a sense. We should be loving, we should be kind, and we should glorify God in the way we treat others and the way we serve others and what we stand for. But we should understand that, in the Bible, it says that they hated him first. So that, if they hate us, remember that they hated him first. So we will face persecution for our faith, for what we stand for. But it's important to remember that we live for an audience of one and we serve for an audience of many. And yeah, how about you? What do you got?
Yeah, it's really good. And I think when you're thinking about serving or doing what you do for an audience of one, here's what I always tell myself, especially when I go debate, when I'm speaking at events, is that I'm accountable to one person when it comes to eternity. I may have interactions with people. I may wrong you. I may wrong somebody else. And of course, I'm accountable for those actions that I committed against you. However, you are not the person that is going to be bringing out justice upon my life in eternity. I'm going to be sitting in the judgment seat before one person, and that is God. And when I tell myself that, the thing I always remind myself is try to speak the truth to the best of your ability in all things. We are called to be loving. We are called to be merciful. We're called to be gracious. But that cannot forfeit the truth in anything I do. And that's what I do in this show. I will be praying for Candace. I hope that she sees what we're saying. And maybe we're in the wrong. Maybe we are. But she sees what we're saying, and she can look at it with a clean heart and say, hey, maybe I'm wrong about some things. Maybe I'm not. And I think that's really important in this when you're going through things like this, is be accountable to one person for truth. If you start to look at people who are imperfect for a perfect standard, it will always be a broken lens of perfection that you're looking through. But when you seek the one person who actually has the ability to live a righteous life on earth without sin, die on the cross for his children, and rise again, then that's when you actually start to take the blinders off and say, you know what, I want to be truthful for one person and one person alone, and extend that to as many people as I can.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I think you said something very interesting there. You said that you may be wrong. And so you asked the lady this question, and I'll ask it to you first. If at the end of this trial, everything happens, and we find out that it wasn't Tyler Robinson and that we were wrong, are you willing to admit you were wrong?
I'd be a fool to say no. I would be, because I think that's what keeps an honest learner. I want to be a learner. I want to be a sponge for knowledge, but there's going to be times where you think you have it right and you have it wrong. And in fact, that might happen more than you actually are right. Mm-hmm. And I think that a fool is quick to defend blatantly obvious wrongdoings that he has already committed. So you know what? If I come out to be wrong on the other side of things, then I'm not going to delete this video. I'm not going to try to cover it up, because it happened, and that's okay. And I learned from it, and we move on, and life moves on. And I'm going to be wrong about plenty of other things, so I'm not going to try to cover up this one either. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm saying I was right the whole. No, I'm kidding. if this happens, if the trial happens, and it ends, and it says that we were wrong, I will willingly admit I was wrong. And I think throughout the course of this trial, as we're watching this trial, if the evidence starts pointing the other way, we should pay attention to the evidence. I'm a big fan of Sextus Empiricus, which he wrote the Pyrrhonian Skepticism, or was a main author in that. And one of the things he says in that is to be a skeptic, to evaluate every angle before making a judgment. And so I'm excited for this trial. Based on the evidence I've shown you today and what we've gone over, I have a judgment. Right? This evidence is pointing me in a direction, but I'm going to keep soaking up the evidence that comes. And if it turns out I was wrong, then I was wrong. But I think that is the importance of critical thinking. And I think we've lost that recently. I think in American culture, we have let other people do the critical thinking for us, because it is very fun and very easy to buy into a conclusion. It's fun to take a stand on things. And look, I am all for taking a stand. But I want to take a stand on evidence, and I want to take a stand on truth. And I think that if I could say anything to America, to the world, and specifically to our generation, it would be this: to think critically about what's presented to you, and to make your own conclusion, and to make sure that that conclusion is based on evidence.
I think it's a great way to conclude. Benaiah, thanks for being on the show. It will not be the last time, I can promise you
Hopefully.
that. And I think next time maybe we'll tackle some biblical topics as well, because I think you got some pretty good insight there. We've had many conversations behind the scenes about great biblical topics and things we want to do in ministry and whatnot. So praying for you, brother. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing what you got.
Thanks for having me. And if you don't mind, I'd just love to pray over you and your guys' viewers as we
let's do
close
it.
This out, if you won't mind. Dear Lord, thank you for my brother Jacob. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. Lord, I pray for everybody who watches this. Lord, would you just fill them with a spirit of wisdom, of critical thinking. And Lord, I pray for our great nation that you would just continue to guide us and direct us. And would you lead a young generation of strong biblical leaders into our future? Lord, all for you and for your glory. In your son's name, amen.
Amen. Benaiah, thanks for being on the show once again.
Thanks for having me.
And guys, that will wrap up our Candace Owens episode. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. Once again, find me on social media across any of my platforms, Jacob York 7. DM me different ideas you got. I'm sure Benaiah is going to be lighting up my phone after this, telling me, you know what, this is what you should talk about, or we should talk about this next. That's great. I love the ideas. I want to talk about whatever is engaging for you guys. But thank you guys for watching once again. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys disagree, I'm open to criticism as well. That's totally fine. But thank you guys for watching. God bless America. God bless you guys. Peace out until next time. It was never about Eric. It was never about
In whatever way possible, we need Christian leaders who have a good understanding of the Bible, to have a good understanding of what's going on in our nation as well, and then be able to communicate that effectively to the youth at the same time.